Hey, look, welcome back to everyone. This stream is being sponsored by eBrief Ready, and this is the law firm stream. So make sure that you're in the right stream. It's a bit like you've got to be on the right aeroplane on this virtual conference. And it's with great pleasure that I'm pleased to introduce Andrea Foote, Director of Leaf Logic. Andrea is an experienced leader with an international track record of success in the information technology and professional services industries. She's worked in legal for a long, long time. Her and I go way back, so it's great to be with Andrea this afternoon. And yeah, we'll hand over to you. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Warwick. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Gundagara and Tharawal people, the traditional custodians of the land from which I meet you now. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that across the wider lands from which we all come together today. So it's amazing. Thank you, Warwick. We're going to see him hopefully pop up throughout the session. We may need to call him in. Alta have done an amazing job pulling this together, and it's been fascinating to be on both sides of the fence as being an attendee and now a speaker. So I appreciate you all joining the call. This is hopefully going to be a bit of an experimental session. So I'd like you to stand by with your keyboards because I'm hoping I can get you to contribute and really be part of this group. And I've got 25 minutes to crack through, so I will crack on with it. Mitch's reminder of the evolution of legal tech in the opening session really resonated with me. It made me look back and realize that I first started in working with legal tech in 1990, my first legal tech house. And way back then, I was working with law firms to introduce crazy things like document creation, document assembly even. We had workflow technology to streamline conveyancing. So that's quite a while ago. It's 30 years later now, and so much has changed. So much has changed. I mean, this conference is an example of that, where we're all sitting here in different spaces, delivering our sessions. But as the decades have gone by, I've become increasingly curious about what's happening with law firms and what's happening around their idea of change. So the first thing I'd just like you to do is into the Q&A session, Q&A panel. If I say the words law firms and change, if I say the words law firms and change, what word springs to mind if I say that? So I just want to see if our Q&A is up and running. And I'm really interested to see the word that comes out. So, wow, interesting, strong words. I know my video is a bit choppy, but so sometimes this turns into a bit of a therapy session. So let's roll with it. And there's a bit of a common theme emerging from that. I'm not sure if you can all see that session, but Warwick, I mean, we've got a mix of everything from digitization, mutually exclusive, fascinating, an oxymoron, love a dictionary, but there's a strong theme of resistance coming out, and that's really something that pushed me into this direction of change. I set out on a journey. Yes, actually, there's almost a universal consistency in the term resistance. That's very fascinating. And I got Warwick's going to hop on and off the camera in case we're going to chew it over. I think we'll just bounce on at this point. Thank you. So I've spent 3 decades working in and around law firms, on the technology side, working on the vendor side, and now I work with law firms and the legal ecosystem. And this is a question that really started to percolate through my brain as the years have gone by. And in 2017, in the beginning of 2017, I was lucky enough to be selected to undertake a master's on the topic of change, helping organizations cope with change. And it's a 2-year program with a business school called INSEAD, a European business school. I was delighted to graduate with distinction, and today we're going to have a very condensed look at my thesis. And what I asked people to, what I was interested in looking at is this conundrum about when you have law firms and the topic of change, it seems particularly fraught with challenge. And so what I was keen to do was to take a step back, dig under the surface, and really see what's happening. And I came up with a title of The Curious Case of Law Firms and the Pressure for Change, because as the comments seem to evidence, this idea of resistance is really very entrenched in the organization. And particularly for people who have to deliver all the good things we've heard about in the last over the last 2 days, there's still that really fundamental challenge of how do you motivate this group. So when I sat down to think about how am I going to investigate this question of what's up, what's happening in the world of law firms with change, how am I going to start to research this topic? And I started off by thinking about interviewing people and realized that what I wanted to do was shift perspective. And so I decided to undertake a drawing exercise. And I arranged a number of interviews with a group of people from across the legal ecosystem. And I got them to draw me how the work of law firms look in the past, the present, and the future. And what we're going to do in the next session, in the next few minutes, is we're going to have a play with this information. I'm going to show you a few drawings that came out of the thesis, and it's only a subset. We did quite a few. And I'm going to get you to reflect with me on what you see coming out of those drawings, and then we'll pull it together and think about what it means. I asked people in the industry, all sorts, lawyers, business managers, CIOs, people in the legal ecosystem, the vendors, consultants, to join with me in this exercise. And I did a series of individual interviews. The drawings that came out, we then discussed, and I used that to create the data to build my thesis. And what I'm going to get you to do today is I'm going to put a few drawings up, one at a time. And what I'm going to ask you to do is take a quick look at the drawing. We'll have 10 seconds to think about it. And then I'd like you to use the Q&A to pop in some things that immediately jump out of you from the individual drawings. What do you see in it? And then we'll have a bit of a reflection. Warwick and I will have a go at picking up what's coming from the drawings and thinking about it. So brace yourself. Here is drawing number 1. Have a quick look at it. Go to the Q&A. And what I can tell you about this is this goes from left to right. The past is on the left, the past of the work of law firms. The present is in the middle, and the future is on the right. What jumps out at you, or what do you make? What particular things do you make from this drawing? Pop it in the Q&A. It's a test. Can we see anything? Oh, interesting. Perfect. How fascinating. That idea of ivory towers that Melissa has put up was a really strong theme that came out. Drowning information, absolutely perfect. This was precisely what that lawyer said. This is drawing by a lawyer, moving from traditional to different thinking. So you can see that that this person, and it was a lawyer, has a view that they're in that process of transition, but very much they're in the middle, still drowning in paper, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. And forgive me because I'm just trying to balance the time of this. Warwick, does anything spring out at you from that? Put you on the spot?
No. Interestingly, when I looked at that middle section, I thought that related to money and them.
Oh,
drowning.
So did I. I thought it was
paper,
money.
It's money. Yeah. My brain just went that way.
You and me both. That's why we get on. Okay, next one. Here we go. This is rapid fire. The next one. Oh, just gone too fast. Too excited. Couple of seconds. This is the past or the present is on the left and the future is on the right. What jumps out at you from this? What do you make of it? And I have to moderate my patience because the Q&A takes a moment to catch up. Oh, look, working from home. Fascinating. Future, working from home. Gillian, spot on. How interesting. The silos. Our new Tessa's really put a finger on it. That idea of the new normal on the right-hand side. These were done in the first half of last year.
Wow.
So doesn't the right-hand drawing, doesn't that kind of feel like now? I thought that was absolutely fascinating. Remote working. So you can see how, yes, people locked away. That big building with the fancy door on the front was a big theme, and lots of drawings.
Andrea, two great ones. Jenny, consumers are in the driving seat.
Yep.
And from Judith, little boxes to sunshine, left to right.
That idea of sunshine came up in so many, this idea of the grim building and then sitting in the sunshine. I'm just going to crack on. This is the next one. A couple of minutes, a couple of seconds, have a think about it. Top left-hand corner is the past, the middle is the present, and the right is the future. I'm still thinking about little boxes and sunshine myself. Crack it into the Q&A. See if I've exhausted people. One of the interesting things about how this drawing is laid out is there's an idea of change, which is by William Bridges, a transition model of change, and it talks about moving from loss through chaos into change. Yeah, that's interesting. Rahil is talking about innovation. Change leads to collaboration. That was quite a theme, and that idea of them holding hands, working together, came through quite strongly. But this process that somebody's drawn, this is actually a lawyer, a senior lawyer who runs a firm. It really expresses a sense of loss, that idea of the trusted partnership, trusted relationship between client and lawyer was dissipating, even down to, I was very struck by the spelling of bastardized. Spelling in the legal environment is very precious, and it was interesting. They were so motivated that they got quite wound up about drawing that dissipation of the trust. I'm going to pop one more up. Once again, have a look, see what you think. Required structure. Nirvana. Somebody talked about nirvana in that last drawing. So again, we've got past, left, present in the middle, and then future. I loved this drawing. Flexibility comes up on the right-hand side, I guess. You can see it moving. There are some interesting shapes on here. We weren't quite sure. We were discussing what they meant when they were put up. But I think what you can start to see from the drawings is the individuals of this subset are split between lawyers and people from the ecosystem. What was interesting was, apart from one person that I interviewed, everybody was capable of drawing the future and had some perspective in it, some perspective on what it might look like. None of them were identical. There were big themes. So yeah, Melissa is saying, ordered to more creativity, to living with ambiguity, which is a brilliant word, and working anywhere and with anyone, very diverse, more connected from Melissa. The curious, I don't know, in preparing for this presentation and thinking about these times that we're living in now, the thing that really jumped out to me was that setup on the right-hand side, the future, that Judith has picked up on one thing, happier, a much happier world. So these themes started to really come out very strongly. There were some very big consistencies across all the drawings that were done individually, one-on-one. And even at the beginning of the drawing, people would often start and say, oh, I'm terrible at drawing, I don't like doing this. You're asking me, a lawyer, to do the worst thing possible, which is not use words. But everybody seemed to have a future and could be able to could draw it to some detail. So in our brief microsecond dance through this, and I must say I spent quite a long time looking into the data, you've picked up on quite a few of the core themes that came out. That idea of people knowing what the future is, that it would be more connected, more agile, happier, flexible. Those were real themes that consistently came through the presentation. So what I thought I'd do is I wanted to take you through that so you could get a sense of how people were drawing their present and their future. And then to take you through a little bit about how the data that I took out from the drawings, the interviews, breaking that down, and how that took shape. What I saw when I pulled all this information out from across all the drawings is it broke into 3 chunks. The first was really to do with the sort of past present, the idea that there's this pressure and that's generating a sense, is triggering risk sensations in this community, that there is a real pressure to change and everyone's aware of it. And we've heard it today. Peter Maloney mentioned just now, talking about that huge intention to change. Joel mentioned it, in his session. Mitch did. We know we need to do it, but it's triggering a huge sense of loss, and a lot of that's focusing on individuals' sense of status and self-esteem. Was this what you qualified to do? Was this your future you dreamed of? And it's starting to, and it pushes that upwelling of resistance. And often a lot of this is unconscious. People wouldn't necessarily be that aware of it, or want to accept it. It's quite a complex set of emotions that it drives. But what I saw from my data is it pushes activity. So one of the key themes was everybody said that technology would be an absolute core thing to go to the future, but almost everybody said the technology wasn't there yet. So there was this real sense of scapegoating of the technology. And one of the interesting pieces was innovation. Everyone knew that innovation was there, but a lot of people, particularly on the law firm's side, particularly on the legal side, they saw it as as almost a release valve for the tension of all the pressure for change. And on the back of this, the idea of being led into the future, for the questions about how will we get to the future, the feeling of the lack of leadership not being quite there, or not being the right structure, was really very strong indeed. So, but almost everybody came to that sunny conclusion: the future will be better, it will be happy, sunny, and it will be even and golden and generally jolly, generally better, healthier, happier, more diverse, more integrated, more balanced, more integrated. There was a common kind of collective fantasy about what our world would be. So that is a very quick rocket through my thesis data, and then this struck. Literally 6 months later, our world is changed, and a couple of you picked it up in the drawings. From the drawings, the world has changed to the future that quite a few people described as their sunnier, happier future. So I think the question for us now is, does this mean, has everything changed? Does this mean that we've made the big shift that we've needed to do? What do we think is going to be the outcome of this sort of this burst of activity that we've seen? I want to be optimistic. I think it was Joel. I can't remember. I was in a session and they were talking about the next step. It was the panel. There was a general sense of a desire for optimism, that the sticking point has been unstuck, but there was an underlying tone of concern that the risk, the uncertainty of the future would still be so great that it would pull people back into the ways of before. So I think the question still remains: what happens with the group who, when pressed to change, it presses them back. For me, this process has all been about perspective. Everybody takes their own view of the world. They see it in their own unique way. And this is a famous optical illusion by William Eli Hill. It's from 1915. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, this can show both a young woman and an older woman, depending on the perspective that you take. What I think I've learned over the last 3 decades is you can push, you can lecture people all about all the good things, but if you don't like it, and that might be a subconscious action, then things fall apart in the change process. And I think we've seen that time and time again. And Melissa's just commenting about the shift in mindset. That bit is just fundamentally a very difficult step. What I learned from my thesis journey is, I think in my former life of standing up for a software product and talking to firms about the technology, it really came through the lens of the vendor putting their impression of what they want. They saw the future of those entities being. But the reality is that in this industry, you've got a group of highly risk-averse, innately skeptical, conservative owners which are attributes that are ideal for their core skill set, trying to be pushed by a whole industry to see the rightness of their ways. What I learned from the thesis is there are ways that you can take a step back and help people get a different perspective, help get their perspective on things. You can make a space for people to uncover their own thoughts and create a neutral ground to see the world through their lens. It's like this drawing here. We've got the young lady with her face turned away from us with her chin, and then you can change your perspective and see the older lady staring mournfully into the past. You can build a deeper understanding of their perspective. So none of this is quick. This isn't a quick fix, but this is about finding new ways to approach the idea of change, and to do that individually and to share it in groups too. I thought I'd end by really giving you 3 questions to help you think about your future now, and your group and your organization, and if it affects everything. If we're thinking now of what our new future looks like, what are you thinking about leaving behind from the old way? What do you not miss at all? What are you looking forward to getting back to? Having joined this event, it's been really amazing to be here. I've loved joining in the sessions and stepping out and being at home, but I've really missed the camaraderie of being around the group, just being that casual human networking that we do, that I love personally. I've really missed that experience, but I've loved the event. And what will you keep from the new way? How will you blend this together? And so helping people think in those ways, there are different ways. Lecturing people doesn't work. We've seen that. There are different ways you can help engage communities to really think differently about what's their deeper feeling about these aspects of change. So I'd like to draw it to a conclusion there. If anyone has any questions, I'd be very happy to take them. My thesis is published, so I can send you a copy if that's something that you would like. My details are here. We've got a question: how can we promote more collaboration and sharing? How can we encourage people to think at an ecosystem level? That, for me, this comes back to how can you help individuals take a step back and get an understanding of how they see that from their perspective? Is there a way that you can help? If you can understand their perspective, rather than trying to badger them into doing it, if you can get a perspective of their apprehensions and their interests, at that point you're better able to co-create a way that makes sense to them. And that's something we can always talk about separately. So please do get in touch. And I hope, Warwick, that I have been good and worked to time.
Oh, look, you're even ahead of time, Andrea, which is fantastic. So there's one more question from Judith. Are there some that may never change, and who might these be?
Oh, yes, and Judith, you're absolutely right. Tragically, there is no magic wand. I don't think it's generational. I think there is a bit of a broad brush. If you're over this age, you're not going to change, and if you're this age, you're not. There's a bit of Stockholm syndrome that goes on. Some of the, and it's not necessarily about role. Younger people come into an organization and model the behavior of leaders. And so some of that, it comes down to the leadership. If you can help your leaders model different behaviors, start to open up to be able to cope with that idea, that tends to have a better way of dealing with it. But yes, there will always be people who can't change.
Hey, thanks, Andrea. And a comment from Tessa. Thanks, Andrea. Loved your creative use of drawings to share some big ideas. And I have to concur with that. Trying to get this across in 25 minutes or less. It's amazing how that can be done in a pretty simple and easy to digest way in terms of those drawings. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andrea. And coming up at 1:55 is the final wrap-up session of AltaCon, where we announce the winners of the pitch competition as voted by our audience.